A lot of wheel spin from Soper, and it's Rouse who gets ahead at paddock. Up to Druids, first time. Rouse, Soper.
What we got here is a Andy Rouse built 1988 car. He put it together for the 88 season where it ran in caliber colours. It was Andy's most successful Sierra he built. He won 9 out of the 11 rounds that year, 10 pole positions, 7 fastest laps. He still didn't win the championship. He actually had a puncture in the last round that robbed him of the championship. It's a great shame, but ultimately the most successful RS500 that he drove. Andy sold the cars to Peter Brock at the end of the 1989 season. Brocky put them into the Mobil-liveried livery and painted the insides, obviously outside the car, deckled them, prepared them for the 1989 BTCC in Australia. Brocky ran this car. This was his car. It was the second car. It was run by Brad Jones, I believe it was, which was the XICS car. And then throughout that season, Brocky won. I think he only won 1 round, which was a very final one. It was his first year in Sierras. The cars were then refreshed ahead of the endurance races in Australia. The Sandown 500 and the Bathurst 1000 aren't part of the Australian Touring Car Championship calendar. They're separate events at the end of the calendar. The cars were refreshed prior to that, where they had some modifications made to them, like moving the air jack to the front, that type of thing. Brocky then paired with Andy Rouse for the 89 Bathurst in this car. The car was put on pole, pretty monster lap, it was a 1 minute 15.8. It was a second faster than Dick Johnson, 0.99 I think it was, which was huge because Dick Johnson was certainly no mug around Bathurst in a Sierra. So it was a storming lap. The car failed to finish that year. Neither of the Brock cars actually finished Bathurst. They had problems with the rear wheel. I've watched this car on TV countless number of times, both as a caliber car and as a mobile car when it was out in Australia. You know, as a sort of 10, 12, 13, 14 year old, and just been mesmerised by them. And I've always been after a Group A car. I've got a nice original 32,000 mile RS500 road car, but it's a Group A car that I always wanted. Essentially, the Group A motor is very, very closely related to the road car motor. That's the whole point of the homologation process when it comes to Group A. Group A, back in the day, the manufacturers had to produce 5,000 road cars, and in that respect, that was the Sierra RS Cosworth. They were then allowed to produce an Evolution variant to homologate some more trick bits for racing to get better performance. They had to produce 500 of these, hence the RS500. So you end up with 500 RS500 road cars, which allowed the Group A cars to then have some of the really hot components on them. The primary differences are fundamentally the turbocharger. You've got a way bigger turbocharger. You've got a T04 turbo on this versus the T3. It goes from something that's sort of the size of an apple to something the size of a melon. I mean, it's a massive difference. And that, along with a much bigger intercooler, which took down here, a second fuel rail, so it's running 8 injectors instead of 4. Means that in road car trim, an RS500 motor is 224 horsepower. In Group A trim, an RS Cosworth motor was about 330, but with the trick RS500 parts on, they run anything from they started around 500, and ultimately the very late Australian motors were given 600 plus, something like this. But fundamentally, the same block. It's still a 2 litre, 16 valve, double overhead cam. It's the same crank, slightly hotter cams in it, BD14 cams. Turbochargers is the same, still running 8 injectors, albeit slightly bigger ones. Same size intercooler, because that's how it was homologated. And this car, all you see in terms of all the hoses and pipes and things that you don't get on a road car, these are just additional breathers to relieve crankcase pressures and such. And on the Rouse cars, what you get is this, unique to the Rouse cars, is a mechanical fuel pump, and it's there purely as a backup. The car's got 4 pumps on it because it just uses a huge amount of fuel. 2 uplift pumps, low pressure, 2 high pressure pumps to get the fuel to the engine. And Rouse, in his wisdom, said, you know, what happens if we have an electrical failure, the pumps drop, blow a fuse, you've just started a lap of Bathurst, you're going up Mountain Straight, all of a sudden your fuel pressure disappears because you've blown the fuse. Everybody else's car is going to stop there and then. It's going no further. With this, the Rouse cars will absolutely at least get you back to the pits to have a look at it and carry on. So purely as a backup and unique to the Rouse cars. And somewhat unique to this car here at the show today. In fact, it's the only one that still has this. A lot of the other cars have different engines in, and they're running more modern configurations, whereas this isn't. It is an original 1989 Rouse motor. It's stamped as such, and it still runs. The only difference is it's running more modern management. It just makes it easier to live with on a day-to-day basis. But the original ECU, the original management is still inside the car. It's still visible. It's just disconnected. It's got a more modern Ford unit connected for day-to-day use, as it were.
Soper in second position. And now Rouse is catching Martin Ray's Honda Prelude. He's going to go absolutely smashing past it, and he does so. Out of Druids, 60 miles an hour. Soper